Great. Thank you, Chair Hughes, committee members. Great to see you all. And, it's been a bit of time since the layout, so I want to thank Senator Hinojosa for your moving, powerful layout this morning. I actually want to take us back a second here because I've been studying kid safety tech policy now for about 5 years. And this committee has been at the epicenter of a nationwide move, really a sea change in the push from parents and now kids to have consumer protection bills that are keeping our most precious population safe online. And the polling and data substantiate these points time and time again. At TPPF, I helped author a comprehensive research paper titled Social Media is a Harmful, Addictive Product. And I could give 20 conclusions. I'll distill it down to this. Not only is excessive social media use linked directly to and inextricably to sky-high increases in depression, anxiety, sex trafficking, body dysmorphia, self-harm, and suicide, but it's even worse than that because the very components and features that are contributing to these decimating outcomes in our kids are what allows these companies to profit further, and so they double down on these tactics and on this content. And for social media companies, kids are the product, and the longer they can glue their eyes to screens, the more data and revenue they can extract. There's a couple of statistics I want to highlight here just to really build out this picture. There are now more studies than I can count. Some of the more recent polling is even more troubling than what we've seen in the last 2-3 years. Specifically, 56% of 13 to 17-year-old kids had mind health quotient scores in distressed or struggling ranges. And comparing that with adult counterparts, that's at 20%. And what we're seeing is a widening in that delta between the mental harms in our minors and adults. It's only growing worse and worse for kids year over year. 51% of American children report being detached from reality. They can cut through the cognitive dissonance and recognize what they're seeing online does not conform to reality, and they don't even know how to exist in today's day and age. From 2010 to 2020, emergency visits for self-harm rose by 188% for teenage girls and 48% for teenage boys. And during that same period, the suicide rate in younger adolescents increased by 167% for girls and 91% for boys. One of the most scary statistics that requires a little context, a recent Pew report found that nearly 50% of kids report using social media almost constantly, meaning every waking second they have the ability to use their products and engage in social media, they're using. And this recent Pew report from April found that these data points are now starting to really manifest in parents and kids alike. Specifically, it found that nearly half of teens, 48%, say social media is harming themselves or their peers, and all but 10% of parents are concerned about the effect of social media on teens' mental health. Statistics are one thing, and I know Senator Hinojosa, you laid out a number of stories. I want to highlight a couple quick ones to really just the data is one thing, but what we're seeing across the state of Texas and the country from parents and others is far more salient. 8-year-old Alani Walton. Lonnie's from Temple, Texas. She came back from a trip with her family and started using TikTok when her stepmom went to take a nap, and stepmom walked up to see her child, Alani, dead at 8 years old. And she was not the result of a death at suicide. It was the TikTok blackout challenge, which algorithmically encourages its users to choke themselves with purse strings and ropes just up to the point of suffocation. The story of 17-year-old Jordan, messaged on Instagram by someone posing as a girl, and after some back and forth and photos were exchanged, it was revealed as a blackmailer who demanded money or they would post these pictures online. Jordan scrounged together all the money he had saved up, sent it to the blackmailers, and they said, "Send more or we will, quote, watch you die a miserable death." Hours later, Jordan took his own life. Finally, 15-year-old Kristen, her parents waited until 15 for her to open an Instagram account. She made what she thought was a new friend shortly after opening it, and after a few months, she disappeared. Parents couldn't find her. Her parents later learned that she had been groomed and sold into sex slavery, and she still is missing and has not been found. In every single one of these tragedies, parents don't think it's going to happen to their kids. They raise straight-A kids who are in athletics and are well-connected in communities, and time again, it's the same parents who think it wouldn't happen to their kids who it ends up happening to. And I could go on. I want to be judicious with time and say, again, thank you, Senate State Affairs, because Texas is leading the country in kid safety, and this bill before us today is the boldest of them all. We stand in strong support, and I'm happy to answer any questions as to our research on this. Thank you.
Thank you both for your testimony. Senator Hinojosa, you have the panel.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. You know, for a lot of liberty-loving patriots like myself and others, you try to justify, well, are we infringing on people's, our children's rights and, just ability to interact and do some of the things that we'd love for them to be able to freely do safely. But could you talk a little bit about, if you know about this, how these algorithms that these social media companies use, and just I'll tee this up real quick. It's just another experiment that was posted from the Wall Street Journal, reported that Center for Countering Digital Hate researchers set up a new account in the United States, and the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia at the minimum age TikTok allows, 13 years old. These accounts paused briefly on videos about body image and mental health and liked them. Within 2.6 minutes, 13-year-old account, TikTok recommended suicide content. Within 8 minutes, TikTok served content related to eating disorders. Every 39 seconds, TikTok recommended videos about body image and mental health to teens. Now, this is a 13-year-old account. Now, we've talked about parental controls. Well, why don't parents just, supervise their children? I'd like to consider myself a pretty, in tune father, and realizing that, our limitation was at 16 for our kids, but realizing what my 16 and 17-year-olds must have been exposed to and are currently being exposed to without my knowledge. Can you speak to any of how those algorithms work? How, anybody who watching might feel like, well, just be a good parent and just, monitor their activity. How could we possibly monitor this type of activity when supposedly a 13-year-old account that is posed as a 13-year-old account is being fed this type of content?
Yeah, I think 3 questions there. I'll try and answer all 3 of them. First, as it relates to algorithms broadly, there's 2 buckets on that. First is social media companies leverage what's known as dark patterns, and it's actually scarier than how it sounds. For example, I looked through on Apple and Google to see if you wanted the most privacy-centric, parent-empowered approach to protecting your kids on the app stores. It takes over 103 specific actions to enable the strongest, most robust parental controls as a default, meaning these products are engineered to make it as hard as humanly possible for even the most engaged parent to have the most protection enacted for their kids. Then, as it relates to algorithms addressing the content and what kids are seeing, it's amazing how 2 seconds of lingering on a post on TikTok or an Instagram reel, the algorithm can instantaneously learn, okay, you lingered a little longer on this content. We're gonna assume you're depressed and sad. And so we're gonna have a couple of cat videos, a couple of happy videos, and see if you are attached to that. They're not, they're gonna keep fomenting whatever that negative emotion is and experience that they're experiencing. And it goes as far as these companies can tell based on pupil dilation, based on how your eyes are scanning across the screen. They know more about your state of mental health in that second than you do, especially if you're a child who doesn't have full faculties of mind and a strong sense of emotional control. Then the question on limited government, or with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, that is a core monolith for organization. When you look at how this bill is drafted, it addresses contracts. You look at any other line of industry, go to a credit card website or a bank, and it specifically says that to enter into a contract, you must be 18 years of age or older. Social media companies are one of, if not the only major platform in industry that allows kids to enter into these contracts. And these contracts, which are 100+ pages of high density legalese that say all of your personal information, all of your geolocation, all your sensitive data is now in our control. And by the way, you are unshackled by this accept button that you hit without actually reading the full terms. So it really addresses that these kids should not be entering into these contracts with multi-trillion-dollar companies that are, again, engineering these products to be maximally addictive. And I think, was there one more, am I missing one more part of the question?
You've addressed the main part of my question, but I have just, one more follow-up, if I may, and this is a slightly different subject matter, because I'm sure we'll hear testimony, I'm hopeful we'll hear more testimony about how this is a very dangerous thing for our teens, but I know there's going to be some out there who say, well, we've gotten young entrepreneurs now who are making a ton of money. This is a great new thing and learning how to make money. But could you speak to the fact that, I'm a state senator. I don't get a whole lot of interaction on my social media accounts. I know that takes time to develop, but I don't have a lot of crazy content on there either. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be crazy content, but in order for a child to be making a whole bunch of money, utilizing, any of these social media platforms, what would you say to something like that? How would they have developed that type of following if it weren't extreme content at some point? Or, is there anything you could address to that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There are no solutions, only trade-offs, right? And there are some good components of social media here. Our research concludes emphatically that the harms far outweigh the good. An example I tend to cite is China, ByteDance owner-operator. They have their own version of TikTok, which is educational and focusing on, how can we raise our kids to be more effective, dynamic economic leaders in the future. In China, the number one aspiration for kids, career-wise, is to be an astronaut. The United States is to be an influencer. And so this begs a cultural question of, is there genuine economic value that we're losing and foregoing these social costs of kids who are more excited about being an influencer than state senators or representatives or whatever it might be? And it's not to look down on the profession, but simply to say we can look at, for the 0.01% of massive success stories, there are kids who are foregoing studying or spending time with friends or other things in pursuit of that 0.01%, which is, again, not reality. It's all through a filter, and the people who make it big oftentimes can misrepresent how likely that actually is as an outcome, because the vast overwhelming majority aren't going to have a massive profit revenue. And I say this as somebody who, when I was 17, I had a YouTube account because I wanted to get into policy and doing videos on that, and it can be a worthwhile pursuit, but right now it is unequivocal that the harms in pursuit of this far outweigh the benefits. And it's not a quantitative answer I can give you, but qualitatively, we're seeing the effects in education outcomes, mental health, and these horrible stories that we continue to hear.
And just one more question. I was watching some of the testimony previously, and I know there were some people also testifying that, this is social media is a great place to do research for your homework. Is there any data that suggests that social media is the place to go when you're looking for information on your research, for your research reports?
I think the research comes from the social media companies themselves. No, there's nothing that replaces an actual engaged learning environment, and there are myriad other sources. This bill does not prevent kids from accessing, specifically educational content. It's defined narrowly to apply to actually how House Bill 20 from Chairman Hughes 2 sessions ago to be very narrowly tailored to hit the companies that are not going to be providing educational benefits. It's a distraction, and as the data I highlighted suggests, it's not resulting in educational improvement.
Thank you for answering my questions, and I appreciate your testimony. Thank you for being here.